The agenda this week considered the state of democracy with Margaret Atwood, spoke to filmmaker Tracey Deer about her new movie, and heard why writer Anand Giridharadas says there are no good billionaires. The agenda's week in review begins talking to Health Minister Christine Elliott about her government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Let's play a clip now. We did a program not too long ago with some small business people, and we talked to one guy who owns a salon in Thunder Bay. Tony Muya is his name. And, you know, because of the government restrictions, which I take your point, you say have been necessary for the health of the people of the province, but because of them, he's been open 10 days this year for business, 10 days in 2021. And, well, let's hear from him, and then I'll come out of that with a question.
We've been a safe place since day one. We followed the guidelines that our local health unit, in conjunction with the provincial government, put into place. We spent thousands of dollars in plexiglass in between stations, front desk. We spent so much money on PPEs in our salon. What's worse, more than our numbers being down, is what the Ontario government has done to really ruin the importance of being a hairstylist or a spa technician in Thunder Bay. We are only 4 different businesses that are still closed in the gray zone. So many of my friends and I, we walk around and think, you know, we're almost better off dead than we are alive.
Now, Tony went on to say he's out $500,000 because he's had to been closed so long. He owes the government money. He's in therapy. His region, again, we checked these numbers this morning, his region has 9 COVID-19 cases. So I guess I want to know what your message is to him and his colleagues who have essentially been closed down throughout the pandemic.
Well, first, I would have to say that I'm sorry that this has been so difficult for him and for his colleagues, that this isn't something that we wanted to do. We had to do based on the medical evidence, and what we heard from the medical specialists was that in certain businesses, there's much more proximity, closeness of people to each other, and that's what happens in salons and in places that do things like facials, that sort of thing. And that's why we had to take the steps that we did. I know there has been some financial assistance for people in Ontario, but I know for some people it wasn't available and that they've gone through very difficult times. But we are doing whatever we can to get as many people vaccinated as possible so that we can move into step 2, which is where salons will be allowed to open, and then into step 3, which will affect other businesses as well. So we watch this very carefully every day. We're not prolonging this for any longer than we absolutely have to. And we want people to be able to get back to their businesses, to get back to their jobs, to be able to get back to all of their families as well.
I do take your point on all of that, but Tony's view would be, I think, if I accurately characterize it, you're a progressive conservative government. You're supposed to be looking out for the little guy. He's a small business person in a rather remote part of the province of Ontario. He's the kind of person who he thought you guys should be looking out for, and he spent the money, he believes, to make his business as safe as possible. And yet he's in deep trouble right now. Do you think you could have done this issue differently and given folks like Tony a better opportunity to succeed, pandemic notwithstanding?
I think that it's something that we have, we've been relying on the medical experts to give us their recommendations about what's safe and what's not safe. And, you know, at the beginning, we didn't have a vaccine. And so we had to take this very, very carefully, which we did. And I know that many people have suffered economically, which we've tried to deal with in terms of providing some economic relief, both in terms of some grants that are available, but also in reducing hydro payments and so on. But I know that people have reached the end of this. I know that people are very anxious to move forward we do have our Minister of Small Business has been looking at these issues since day one, have been asking many questions. It's not as if we say that nothing can be open and that's the end of it. We have very vigorous internal discussions about what can and what cannot be open based on the medical evidence, but also based on the precautions that people are taking in their businesses.
I think it was in the middle 1980s when you started to think about or started to write *Handmaid's Tale*. And, and you know, this was at a time where the world, actually as the 80s progressed, where the Berlin Wall eventually came down and the Soviet Union disappeared, and it looked like democracy was doing rather well. And yet you're thinking about a time of you're thinking about a dystopian time.
True.
At that time. Did you have a notion that democracy was going to be fragile nearly 4 decades down the road?
It's always fragile. It's a very fragile governing form. So each governing form has its own fragilities. Monarchies that depend on an heir, you know, somebody who's going to be the next king, they're very fragile. They're vulnerable to not having a successor. Then you got civil wars. So yeah, democracies are always going to be somewhat fragile depending on the rules and depending on whether you allow super PACs and whether you, I think the first big decision was in the 19th century in which corporations were deemed to have the same rights as people. Not only a bad decision, but an unreal decision because corporations are not people. So how much is a democracy subject to the pressure of lots and lots and lots and lots of money? And we have tried to take steps in Canada to limit that. And you can look south of the border and see what happens when you don't limit that.
Mm-hmm. I would like to follow up and ask you a bit of a chippy question related to the North American electorate. And that is, you know, pollsters tell us that anywhere from 20 to 40% of the electorate, maybe a little more some days, well, frankly, don't think a lot about multiculturalism, don't think that gender fluidity is a real thing, are not fans of increased immigration. And I guess I want to ask you, what kind of voice do you think people who believe that are entitled to have in this democracy?
Same voice as anybody else. They get a vote. So, you know, that's how democracies are supposed to work. So if 80% thought that and elected the government, then that would be the government they had elected. And you and I might not like that, but it would be a result of the democratic process. So as I've said, every governing form has got its fragilities, and that's one of them. They don't always produce something that you or I might approve of.
Do you think progressive people...
But they have produced it, yeah.
Right. Do you think progressive people need to take any responsibility for, and this does happen in some cases, I'm not alleging it in this case, but for, you know, kind of shoving people who believe that, shoving their noses in issues which encourage them to explode back?
Well, first of all, I don't like the word progressive.
Okay, what should we say?
Why is that? Because it is based on a belief that progress is inevitable, that there's such a thing as the right side of history and that you have to be on it. And neither of those things are true. So history doesn't have sides. And all you have to do is go back and look at it, and one day you're on, quotes, the right side of history, and the next day you're not. It's more like the revolving wheel of fortune. One day you're up, the next day you're down. Public opinion changes. Things that were approved of 50 years ago are now something nobody would ever do. So it's like that, but progress is not inevitable, and it's very dependent on material conditions. So when there's lots to go around, you're more likely to get tolerant public opinion. When there's less to go around, people get scared.
I gotta tell you, I love this movie, but boy, you do not spare a thing. Let's just show a little clip of this and then we'll come back and chat, okay? Sheldon, if you would, let's go.
My name is Digahandekwa. Or you can call me Beans. Everybody does.
This is our road! Our road!
If you can't feel pain, then no one can hurt you.
Ah!
Tracey, there are moments when I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking, did this really happen? I sure hope this did not happen because this is really too much. So let's start there. How much of this film was autobiographical?
So the emotional through line of the film is very much representative of my coming of age story. In terms of all of the big historical events, the recreations that you see in the film, these are all moments that did happen. I personally wasn't at all of them. I put my character there in order to tell this story, but I was at some of them. And so some of these scenes in the film are ripped directly from my memory, and I endeavored to recreate them exactly as I experienced them. So it's a combination. It's a combination of things I actually experienced myself, historical moments that actually happened, and some moments created to represent the emotional moments that I went through in my coming of age.
Yeah, I get you. I guess you would have been a kid of about 12 years old when the Oka crisis happened. So I'm wondering how influential all of that was in your, I guess, eventual decision down the road to become a filmmaker.
So it was very influential in the filmmaker I have become. I will say that. That summer really shattered my sense of safety, my sense of self-worth, and it led me down a very, very dark path, a very hopeless path for much of my adolescence. And it was the resiliency and the strength of my people that I'm so grateful for, because I was able to climb out of that darkness, and the Oka crisis and what I experienced there is really now my fuel in all the work that I do and in all the bridge building I seek to do with the stories I tell. I never want something like that to happen again, and I never want another Indigenous child to have that kind of coming of age. In terms of it inspiring me to become a filmmaker, I was already on that path. I had started watching movies at home. I was just enthralled with these different worlds and the safe space to feel my emotions. So I was 12 years old when I was hit by the thunderbolt to become a filmmaker, and I was also 12 years old when I went through this really devastating moment, and it began this journey of figuring out who I am as an Indigenous person and what that means to be an Indigenous person in this country.
This did take place 30 years ago, and I remember it well. This, of course, a dispute over a developer who wanted to build a golf course on what was ancestral burial land for Indigenous communities in Oka, Quebec. And it's 31 years ago. But how much of the feeling of this story do you think is still very present day?
It is entirely current. So the film is a period piece, 31 years ago, as you said, but the themes are all still playing out across this country. The damage that was done to me as a little girl is still being done to our children across the country. So even though it is a period piece, it is still, it's a current story with a very vital message that things do need to change right now, so that this is no longer the coming of age story of our children, because it is devastating and it destroys hope. And it just has to stop. I'm tired of it being an unsafe place for Indigenous people. It just really does have to stop.
I did read your piece in the New York Times, I think it was the New York Times the other day. Fascinating column, and I guess I I guess I'm one of those who thought Warren Buffett was one of the good guys, and then I read your column which says he's not one of the good guys. And I thought he was one of the good...
one of the good guys, and the good guys are the most dangerous guys.
Okay, all right. I guess I thought he was one of the good guys because I remember him saying he wants to give away 99.5% of his fortune. And in response to ProPublica's report, he wrote, quote, "I continue to believe that the tax code should be changed substantially and that huge dynastic wealth is not desirable for our society." So he seems to be in the right place. His heart seems to be in the right place. Why is his being one of the good guys making him one of the most dangerous guys as well?
Because the bad guys are quasi-criminals, right? I mean, there are people who commit financial fraud on Wall Street. There are people who run social media platforms in ways that imperil democracy and enable white supremacy. There are people who make billions of dollars selling opioids. That's a certain category of thing. And those stories dominate the news. You've done stories on those things. I've done stories on those things. When people focus on those stories, we're at risk of miseducating them that the problem is the corruption of the system, when in fact the problem is just the system. And part of what is powerful about this story is even when the system is working well, even when you have a well-intentioned person like Warren Buffett, this is barbarism. It is barbarism to have people accumulating $100 billion plus fortunes, while here in New York City, all around me, one of the richest cities in the history of human civilization, there were all these kids this year who couldn't do the remote learning they had to do because they don't have Wi-Fi in New York City in the year 2020 and 2021. These resources are resources that were not paid as wages to folks, were not paid as taxes. And Warren Buffett is playing this interesting double game that we got to be real about. Warren Buffett says, my income taxes should be higher. What this article reveals is that is a trick, because he doesn't have a lot of income. He doesn't report a lot of income. So it's not a surprise now that this story has come out that Warren Buffett is in favor of raising income taxes, because Warren Buffett basically does not have a lot of income. And he presumably constructs his affairs to not have a lot of income, right? And what he does have is appreciating wealth. And I have not heard Warren Buffett advocate for Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax or Bernie Sanders' wealth tax. There have been proposals on the table. Where has he been? Where has he been? If he's truly in favor of ending dynastic wealth and breaking down these fortunes, there have been proposals on the table that you and I have spent time discussing before, and half the country has discussed before here in the United States. Where was he? There was no op-ed then. What he has done is advocate for raising taxes on a kind of money that he doesn't really have, which is income.
Well, let's just remind everybody what Elizabeth Warren had to say, because we're going back a couple of years now when she was running for the Democratic presidential nomination. She proposed a wealth tax on 2% of assets worth more than $50 million and 3% on assets worth more than $1 billion. That was then. Where do you think we should be now on those numbers?
What's interesting is I think that, her plan, and then Bernie Sanders had a plan. These are very, very important conversation starters. They were elevated into the presidential campaign. I think we had a real debate about capitalism and billionaires in this 2020 presidential primary on the Democratic side that we have not had before in America, and that was terrific. But I actually think, in light of what this reporting is showing, even the Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders wealth tax plans are good starts, but inadequate to the problem. I mean, grossly inadequate to the problem, possibly inadequate by a factor of 5 or 10.
That's just some of what we covered this week on The Agenda. For more, including the full conversations, you can visit our website, tvo.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.